Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining. I hope you can hear me clearly. As I said, we're delighted to have Kathleen today for our final ICCM online event. Developed, I guess, in response to the pandemic, the ICCM online events have offered us a kind of wonderful and insightful moments of connection with community musicians, music educators, music therapists, music scholars, researchers, and other practitioners from around the world. And after 2 years of the activity, we've decided to take a pause on the events to reflect, and therefore it feels really appropriate that this final event, led by Kathleen, will centre on reflective practice. Okay, I think that's the kind of admin side of things done. It leaves me now to introduce the wonderful Kathleen Turner, who is the most fabulous practitioner, researcher, community musician, singer-songwriter. We're trying to work out when we met. Kathleen and I met some time ago. It's been a number of years, but we can't ever remember that first meeting. I guess the only thing else I should say about you, Kathleen, is that Kathleen leads the Community Music Masters programme at the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance. But I'll leave you to introduce yourself more formally, Kathleen, and just to say that we're delighted to have you. Thank you so much, and we're looking forward to the conversation today.
Thanks so much, Joe, and thanks everybody for having me. I'm going to share my screen and then I'll just check with everyone that you can see that. So I might get Joe, would you mind giving me a wee thumbs up there? Yeah, great, wonderful. Okay. Well, listen, I'm so delighted to be joining you as part of this series of conversations. Thank you very much to all of you for coming. I am a community musician and an arts practice researcher, and I'm a singer and songwriter. And as a community musician, the majority of my facilitation work prior to the pandemic was with large groups of singers, large choirs. And so that's kind of the context for where I'm coming from today. And I'm sure, like all of you in various ways, in the past 2 years, I have experienced quite a dramatic shift in my daily life. And one of the consequences of that has been a really big change in my professional identity. And in this rush to kind of get back to normal, whatever the normal is, there doesn't seem to be many spaces to stop and ask, what on earth has just happened? And so that's what I'm seeking today. It's a moment to pause and breathe and notice. And so I'm asking this question of myself: how can I value interruption? Before I get stuck into the presentation part, I just wanted to set, I guess, a brief framework for all of us today so that you know what to expect from me. So I'm going to talk for about 20-25 minutes on this topic in response to this question, but my response is an invitation into my reflexive practice as a community musician, navigating the last couple of years. So I'm not offering this as a universal experience by any means. I have no assumption here that your experiences are the same. Yours may be vastly different to mine. Your discoveries in the last couple of years may have been more joyous. Your challenges may have been more painful. But the space I want to offer here is an acknowledgement and an interrogation of my experiences so that you might consider them in contrast to or in conversation with your own. There are lots of multiple complex ways that we have all navigated the pandemic and the other societal issues that have been going on throughout that, and none of them are easy. So this is a space for reflection, for solidarity, and also for provocation. So throughout the presentation, I am going to pause a number of times and offer a number of provocations for us all to consider. And at those moments, I'll be inviting you to reflect individually, just on your own, in your own notepad or whatever way that you would like to do that quietly. And then later at the end, we'll come back as a whole group to discuss that. But I would say in the midst of that, to remember to be kind to yourselves, to each other, and to have a notebook at hand. So briefly, I want to clarify what I mean when I talk about reflexive practice, because that's quite important to what I'm doing today. I'm using Kim Etherington's framework. Kim Etherington, and I have a list of references that I use from today at the end for anybody who wants them. But Kim Etherington writes that being aware of being a reflexive practitioner means being aware of how our own thoughts, feelings, culture, environment, and social and personal history inform us as we dialogue with participants. So I'm zooming in on my specific experiences and then zooming back out to consider them in a wider social, political, cultural context. And I do this kind of work because I think there's real power in reflexivity. It challenges this notion that we are always perfect academics or always energized community musicians, and it makes space for our humanity within our work. And I love this particular quote. I wanted to share it from the brilliant feminist pedagogue Bell Hooks, who said, "This fear of being found personally wanting in some way is often one of the greatest barriers to promoting critical consciousness, especially about racist or sexist domination, since the practice of critical thinking requires that we all engage in some degree of critical evaluation of self and other. It helps if we can engage individuals in ways that promote self-motivated interrogation rather than reactive response to outer challenge." Now, why do I love that quote? Well, because often I think that in reflection, we think about the work. So what worked, what didn't, what next? And then we can ignore our own humanity as practitioners because of this fear, as Bell Hooks puts it, of being found in some way personally wanting. But if we can make space for reflexivity, for acknowledging what we carry in our work in as community musicians, as facilitators, as artists, as academics, we can be more critically conscious. And I think as a result, we can be kinder and more generous to ourselves and each other in our work. So that's a bit of a long preamble, but that is why I am asking this question today. How can I value the interruption? So let's look at those two words, value, meaning the importance, worth, or usefulness of something, and interruption, meaning to stop continuous progress, to break continuity, to obstruct. So this question could be rephrased in a number of different ways. It could be, how can I notice the importance of stopping continuous progress? How can I recognize the worth of breaking continuity? How can I see the usefulness of an obstruction? So I'm going to share with you some of the interruptions that I have encountered and continue to encounter. And I'm going to consider the value that I have found or am trying to find in each one of those. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a sense of loss. And to articulate that, and it's a very particular sense of loss that I'm going to talk about. To articulate this, I'm going to read to you an extract of a piece that I have written. And this is a memory of the last time that I worked with a choir, and it was in March 2020. We are standing in the lobby of the Irish World Academy in the late afternoon. Light is pouring in through the walls of glass that front the building, and there's a slight glow of green coming from the trees outside. Beyond the River Shannon flows by. She is a constant, reassuring presence, the goddess Shona, possessor of wisdom. She looks in through the windows of the Irish World Academy, reminding us to carry the sacred and the magical into our daily work. The singers from the Irish World Academy Gospel Choir have formed a semicircle. 40 students are facing me, looking at me, waiting for me to raise my arms and lead them in a collective inhale. The excitement is palpable as we begin to sing through the piece fully for the first, and as I'd later discover, the only time. The voices reverberate around our double-heighted foyer, and some people passing by pause on the stairwell and corridors above to look down and listen. The choir supports the soloist through these thick layers of harmony, articulated mostly in vowel sounds rather than words, rising and falling to support his voice. The final chorus grows to a joyful call before falling back to a quiet hum. The soloist sings the closing phrase. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, over and over, as both he and the collective croon of the choir fade into silence. The passers-by applaud. We smile at one another, joining in the applause ourselves, and I turn to congratulate the soloist. He is beaming. Community musician Dave Camlin says of his practice, "For me, it feels like the real value of what I do, if I'm getting it right, is that people feel somehow transformed by the experience of art and by a musical experience, and it's revealed in the way that they talk about it." After the rehearsal of this song, we stood on the lobby and we reflected on the piece. We identified moments that needed to be revisited and refined, and we discussed aspects that felt particularly strong. I invited the singers to consider what they noticed, what they heard, and what they felt. And so if I were to trace the lines of that sense of loss that I mentioned, they lead back to this moment. I miss using my voice to connect with others, facilitating the unpacking of collective musical experiences and interrogating if or how or why we experience a moment of transformation. I miss using my voice to share a song, break it down into its component parts, and then gradually build it back up into a cohesive sound. I miss using my voice. And for me, that has meant a significant shift in my professional identity. I want to share this quote from Bilo, who says that how an academic contextualizes their identity has an impact on the way in which they make sense of their workplace. The changing context for academics is laden with tension as the academic seeks to understand or reconcile their imagined identity, associated with the past, present, and future constructions with that of their current reality. For me, I could replace the word academic here with community musician or singer or artist. I had a way of making sense of my workplace, and that changed overnight, and it felt like a short, sharp shock. So, what's the value of that interruption? Well, for me, I migrated all of my work online, and for a number of different reasons, it has remained there. I'll be returning to full face-to-face teaching in September, and I have mixed feelings about that, but what have I discovered in the meantime? What is the value of the interruption? Well, I've learned a whole bank of new technical skills for online facilitation that honestly I wouldn't have had the space or time or motivation for in my previous work. I've had the privilege of online community partnerships, connecting with students and colleagues in Canada and UK and Germany, Singapore and Australia, and that's all while staying in my office. I've had the honour of working with a local school for children with complex needs, working with our master's students to create online music resources. And because that music making happened on screen and not in person, our students were the only adults those children saw in school or could interact with during school without a mask. It's been hard work, it's been challenging, but I have learned lessons that I wouldn't have if I had not been interrupted. And on top of that, I don't think I will ever take the experience of group singing for granted again. So we're going to pause here for a moment, and I'm going to invite you just individually, personally, to just take a couple of minutes to write, to reflect, to consider these provocations. What losses and or gains do you feel that you have made in the last 2 years? And how, if at all, did the losses make the gains possible? So I'm going to leave you with that provocation for just a minute to 2 minutes, and then we'll continue. So my next interruption, I am tired. I've gone from being in a really vibrant, inspiring workplace to working primarily in my kitchen or in my office. In the Irish World Academy, we typically had 140 live events per year. So in any given week, as well as my normal teaching and work, I could be at a seminar about contemporary dance or a lunchtime concert of renowned uilleann pipers. I'd have coffee with my colleagues and we'd chat and we'd make plans. And there was this constant flow, a live flow of inspiration and communication. And that motivated me to try to be the best community musician or artist or teacher that I could be. Finnish artist researchers Antila and Suominen write that for social change to take place, determination, courage, and passion are needed, and this vigour must be channeled through skilled and willful action. I have to be absolutely honest in acknowledging my interruptions here because I have found it really difficult to maintain that determination, that courage, that passion, that vigour when my usual resources of inspiration, of energy were not available to me. So again, what was the value in that interruption? Well, for me, it has really highlighted the need to prioritize well-being first. We can only be generous, compassionate facilitators if we have full tanks of generosity and compassion within ourselves. So that has motivated me to try and find new ways of putting petrol in the tank, actively seeking inspiration rather than passively receiving it. So last year, I did a graduate diploma in teaching and learning through our Centre for Transformative Learning at the University of Limerick. I have wanted to do that programme for a long time, but I would not have made the time for it if I didn't need something. And this September, I'm starting a course in creative writing part-time because I've realised during this interruption, or maybe rather as a consequence of this interruption, that I love being taught as well as teaching. I am energized by learning. So let's pause again and consider this one. How do you put petrol back in the tank for your creative self? What do you do or can you do to put petrol back in the tank for your creative self? We'll take another minute and a half to consider this one. The final interruption that I'm going to mention is that I'm angry. And I want to be honest about that interruption because there are very few spaces for women in particular to be angry and not to be asked to calm down, to relax, to contain ourselves. Don't panic. Don't be so emotional. And I realize that I say that as a privileged woman. I'm white, I'm able-bodied, I am educated, I'm middle class, I have a full-time job, and I have a microphone. So if I am raging, I can only imagine what it must feel like to be in the world as a disabled woman, as a traveller woman, as a black woman, as a trans woman, as a Ukrainian, as a refugee. So what do I do with all the rage? How does it become valuable and not paralysing? One of the clear outcomes of the research so far coming out of the pandemic is that the negative impacts of this time have been compounded by socioeconomic inequity, systemic racism, gender-based violence, sexism, and ableism. We have not all been in this together, or at least not to the same degree. But I think that has re-emphasised the urgency of the kind of work that we do as community musicians. I'm really inspired by the work at the minute of Diana Yarachuk and Justice Crowr, who remind us that inclusion and inclusivity are not the same thing. They write that ultimately we believe that inclusivity is both a critical practice and an ethical one. Unless they ask questions about who is in a position to be welcoming and hospitable and who is on the outside to be welcomed in, community musicians risk engaging in the very kind of exclusionary practices that many of us are seeking to avoid in our efforts to be inclusive. Inclusivity is an action. So then what can I do? How can I make sure that my student recruitment is inclusive? How can I diversify my reading lists? How can I adapt my assessments for students? How can I be a better advocate and ally? How can I pass the mic? So we're going to pause there one more time. And the provocation I have is, how, if at all, can anger be useful? What motivates you to change? And we'll pause there for another short moment. So the last thing that brings me to is this. I am awake. And for me, that's the outcome of all of these interruptions, or at least the outcome for where I am at the moment. That for me is the overarching value in the interruption. I am sad, I am tired, I am angry, but I am awake, and I am more alert to inequity than I think I've probably ever been. So I'm going to close again with the words of Bell Hooks, who says, "Difference enhances life." This is not to be confused with shallow notions of inclusiveness or experiencing diversity where one stands in the space of privilege, taking in and from those who are other, but rather where one is fundamentally moved, transformed utterly. The end result of this transformation is mutuality, partnership, and community. I think if I am to gain anything from the interruption of the last 2 years, as deeply uncomfortable as it has been, I'm looking for that, to be fundamentally moved, to be transformed utterly. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and I really look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Wow, thank you so much, Kathleen. And thank you. I feel like you've given me a bit of petrol for the tank on this call now. That was absolutely, yeah, so much food for thought there, and for the field of community music more broadly. Kathleen, did you want to, before we open out to discussions, there's been some comments in the chat and I'm sure there are others. Did you want us to go into breakouts now? Do you think that's a good thing to do, or should we have a little bit of a debrief together first? What's your sense on that? We could ask the group, of course.
Yeah, maybe to get a sense. It's always hard, isn't it, online to get a sense of the feeling of the room, you know, um, and so I'd be totally open to that. You know, if people would like, we can take a moment to look in the chat, because I actually couldn't see the chat as I was presenting, so we could take a moment for that and then maybe go into breakout rooms. How do people feel about that? Some thumbs up.
Right.
Okay, so we have Pam here who said that loss, oh, yes, I'm caught up here. Loss, gain, responsibility were entangled and not separated or dominated by purely humanist dispositions. I'm still working through and attuning to a new way of being, thinking, and doing. I identify with that. I have a heightened engagement with sensorial liveness and being together through place as event. The place is still often on Zoom, like today. Absolutely. And this continues to play out as a process of working through and making with differently, including a myriad of nature, culture, possibility walks, thinking differently about the classroom without borders. Gosh, what a deep reflection there, Pam. There's beautiful language in there. I love the idea of nature, culture, possibility walks. That sounds phenomenal. I mean, certainly I identify with lots that you said there, that idea of, you know, we're considering and reconsidering place. And you know, that's been, I certainly have a completely different sense of place than I would have had prior to all of this. I don't know how, you know, Joe, how do you feel about how would you guys like to facilitate this discussion in terms of responding to some of these comments?
Well, I think as you've mentioned Pam's comments, Pam, if you'd like to talk about them briefly, you can. Alternatively, because there was quite a lot there for us to reflect on, and I
Mm,
love your modelling of a reflective practice, Kathleen, it's just beautiful. Sometimes we can find it helpful to just digest a bit in some small groups, have a discussion about what's coming up for people in the room, and then come back together.
lovely.
So okay, yeah, Pam, thank you very much for that. So let's move to breakouts. Apologies, we sent you off without saying precisely what to come back with. We know that people have been sharing really deeply and really personally, so the breakouts, they're not going to be in the public view, and anything you share in this space, please do take care of yourself and of others, as Kathleen mentioned. And I was beginning to invite people to kind of talk about any connections you're finding with the kind of macro, so the wider field of community music. I know that Kathleen's discussion and provocations were really making me think, you know, what does this mean for the broader field of community music if we conceive of it as an act of intervention? And with that, given that time is moving forward, hello, if you're okay, I'd love to pass over to you to talk about, yeah, the things we were mentioning just before we all got back together.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you first, Kathleen. That's really, really interesting talk. And I have to say, I actually do remember the last day of singing, because I think I was in my desk trying to finish up and I popped out like, la 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 la, what's going on? There's something happening. Yeah, I kind of feel that sense of loss of that buzz in the academy. But I think when Joe popped into a room, we were talking about anger. And I was just saying that for me, I'm coming to a stage where I have to kind of get a definition of a positive anger and a negative anger. And I mean, I read the news and I see things and I get really, really angry. And but I know it's an anger mixed with helplessness, because I know I don't have a change in that, or a say in you know, or if there is, I'm not really sure what is that. And reflecting that back to the community music circle, when I work with refugee primarily, they could tell me things that will make me upset and a little bit angry, but I have to draw the line and understand I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a case social worker, and I don't have any influence. Or you know, when they tell you about, you know, what's happening in like their process of something, I am upset, I am angry, but I can't really do anything in that retrospect. So I'm kind of trying to differentiate the feelings of anger that will actually help me produce something for a change or better myself or better the situation, and the anger that's just going to eat away at me, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's what I was thinking when Joe came through. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hella. And it really began to spark for me kind of the ways in which reflecting on anger or feelings of helplessness can potentially inform or shape the role of the community musician in the future. And I wonder what a collective unpacking of that might look like or might be able to do. So thank you so much, Hella. Kathleen, before you respond to that, I wonder if there's anybody else that wanted to just offer something up in this space now or ask a question coming out of your conversations. My learning in the Zoom space is to embrace the Zoom tumbleweed, because I feel like as a video platform we're expected to have this instantaneousness about us and a performativity that isn't always conducive to dialogue or giving people space to respond. So I'm just bringing that tumbleweed into the space here. And Debbie, thank you. I can see that you're saying that your breakout discussions helped to identify the common experience of a lack of confidence and connection, and that everybody valued events like this where you can get inspiration. That's back to that petrol in the tank. So thank you, Debbie, for that comment, and thank you, Kathleen. Debbie, you're very welcome to talk on that if you want to, or to continue to post through the chat. Kathleen.
Yeah, I was just writing, but it's probably easier to say. But we also identified the fact that there aren't many of the people that we work with didn't ever engage with the digital opportunities that are available to us because they haven't got the technology, they haven't got the skills to be able to do that. And actually, one of the things that's become really apparent from the last 2 or so years is that digital poverty and what it means, and the fact, yeah, and I think it's something where we still need to be angry, to be fair, that it still exists, and lots of people don't get to do this. There you go.
Thank you, Debbie. Sorry, Kathleen.
Yeah, could I jump in there actually and just absolutely. I think that's such an important point, and it has really highlighted in lots of ways. I think the assumption for lots of communities where children could do their schooling from home and would automatically have access to multiple tablets or iPads or whatever, or that there would be adequate care at home to make things like this possible, or that there would be access to high-speed Wi-Fi or any of those things. And I think one of the really valuable things absolutely to get angry about in a useful way is that dichotomy. So on the one hand, you've got the digital poverty element, and then on the other as well, I follow a graduate of the academy who's a brilliant disability activist who, when the pandemic hit, also on the other side of that coin, when we all started kind of engaging with things remotely, was like pointed out, well, welcome to what I've been doing for a long time in order to access a lot of the things that you guys take for granted. So there was the other side of that too, so there on one hand the digital poverty, and then on the other hand a reliance and a need for digital access, that a lot of we were kind of a lot of able-bodied, me as an able-bodied person was suddenly kind of looking at as a brand new thing. There's been so many things, like so many layers of things that I feel like have been revealed in all of these aspects. And in terms of, Hala, what you said about shades of anger, I just think is so valuable, because it can be exhausting, can't it, trying to make that distinction between what is, you had a beautiful way of putting it, what anger is useful and what anger can eat you up. And it's quite hard work differentiating between the two, isn't it? It's this constant kind of emotional labor figuring that out, and also the additional layer of not accepting, but recognizing, as you rightly pointed out, the things that are maybe beyond our own personal capabilities to do anything about. And that's a lot. It can be a lot. And I think I find the usefulness in saying that out loud, actually. This is a lot, instead of assuming that it's okay and just moving on, you know. But yeah, thank you both for those contributions. I think they're really important. Sorry, Joe, you were going to say something there.
No, I was just going to say thank you so much for that, Kathleen. And you talked about, these interruptions over the recent years kind of revealing things. And I just wondered if I could invite you to reflect on what you think might be revealed for the field of community music. So I was particularly kind of interested in your, when you presented the Hooks quote on reflection and thinking about a critical kind of inquiry or practice is about critical reflection of the self and others and in that relationship. And I was just wondering, in that sense, thinking about community music as an act of intervention, what are you sensing? And it might be an unfinished thought. What are you sensing is being revealed for the field?
Oh, that's a great question, Joe, and I have been thinking about that a lot. I mean, again, I would always say that I can only ever offer what I'm noticing from my lens, but I mentioned towards the end of the presentation there that I got to do the graduate diploma in teaching and learning, and one of the things that we did as part of that program was we had to write a scholarly reflection on our own particular field. And when I was writing about it, I had to turn the lens on myself and think about, okay, well, what things are being revealed, interestingly enough, about my practice right now within the larger context of our work in education, in this case, community music. And what it revealed for me was it was discomforting, but in a really good way, a very positive way. I think an assumption that I had, that because I'm a community musician, I automatically work in an inclusive way. And that really pushed me to pause and notice the ways that I had assumed that. So particularly as a course director of a master's program in community music, like, look around at your classroom, Kathleen. Who is there? Brilliant people, absolutely. But who is not there? And why not? Why in my 6 years as course director, have I never had a student who is a traveller? Why have I never had a student with a disability that they have, either visible or hidden? Why? And there must be reasons there. And so it's before the reflections that I was starting to consider, and I'm trying now to put actions into place as a result of that, is that it happens before the students actually get to the room. So it's happening in recruitment. It's down to, again, that idea of welcome that Deanna and Justice mentioned in that inclusivity clip that I talked about. If we're going to assume being welcoming, well, who are we welcoming and who are we not? So what's going on in my recruitment? What's going on in the university's materials? What's going on in our building? We're having discussions about our building at the moment, because it's a state-of-the-art building, right? But if you come into our building on crutches, you can't get into the theatres because they are heavy theatre doors. So over the summer, we're looking at getting automated just push buttons so that nobody needs help to get into the theatre anymore. Things like that. But those are silent things to say who is or is not welcome in our space. And I think that's probably the biggest layer for me that has been revealed, was that I think I had kind of lulled into a false sense of security, that I'm a community musician, I believe in inclusivity, I really am passionate about contributing to equity. What am I missing? Because I'm obviously missing things. And that for me has been a real, sharp pull back to reality. That I'm still trying to really work on. And also as well, the other thing I would say that I think is really important for any of us working in any kind of research or in curriculum is our reading lists. Really basic thing, but also it can just be in the background there, very silently operating away. If our reading lists are continuing to be primarily men, primarily Western, primarily white, almost always able-bodied, what's going on with that? There are real absences. And so I think from a field point of view, I really want to be reading more people. I really want to be introducing students to more voices. I want recommendations. Send them to me, please.
Well said, Kathleen, and thank you. Those of you on the call, please send your recommendations for reading to Kathleen, and those of you watching on YouTube, because this will go out there, please also send your recommendations to Kathleen. Kathleen, I think what you highlight there, a revealing of the assumptions of that might be contained or being perpetuated by the field of community music is really useful there. And that's actually something I was finding during our last ICCM event. Sorry, I'll just do a plug to that for those of you that want to go and watch it when it's out, with Nate Holder, where we were thinking about community music, with its legacy of developing as an oppositional practice, oppositional to the hierarchies of there being, high art and other art, opposition to kind of institutions as custodians of culture, your museums and galleries and so forth, opposition to the fact, that it's argued that some people can make music and others can't, that sometimes we might take it for granted that we are doing things better or right, but actually to keep refreshing and coming back to this reflective practice that you're talking about is so crucial. Thank you, Kathleen. Now, we've got a good 10 minutes left to chat, so I don't want to take up all the air time, and thank you to those of you that have been posting things in the chat, but I just want to welcome anybody else that would like to add to this now. So Fiona, if you want to unmute and talk about your tech poverty comment, you're very welcome to. Debbie, thank you very much for your personal reflections there, and we're really happy to have you here on this call, so thank you for joining and do keep in touch. Okay, Hala, yeah, let's go to you.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to your conversation, Kathleen, about inclusivity. I'm just looking as well around when I join seminars like this and workshops and conferences, who is there and who is not there. And I come from the Middle East, and I have a lot of people that I know working in community music, and they're doing brilliant jobs, but they're never here. I don't even think they know of these things, or perhaps their English isn't a level to be attending or reading or engaging. And recently in my research, I've been talking to a lot of practitioners in Europe and outside, and they're doing work. It's blown my mind of work. Like, one person explained levels of safety that I've never read about in community music. And I'm like, oh my God, this is gold for us. But again, and that's something I just want to put out there, is like, it's not just in the books, it's just who is writing the books, and why are we not hearing from people who are not academics, they're practitioners, and they probably have golden information that will help us learn. So just, that's another layer to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hella. The politics of knowledge production. Sorry, Kathleen.
Not at all. Yeah, I think that's such a valuable point, Tala. I think that especially, when we're coming from within the academy, as in not the Irish World Academy, I mean the broader scholarly academy, that there's a sense of who's in and who's out, or who can or who can't contribute to the conversation, or and the conversation is almost always in English. And there's different places, that are doing a lot to challenge that. Like, there's brilliant stuff happening in Germany with Alicia de Banfi Hall, where they're having a lot of stuff that's in German and a lot of international students. Um, but absolutely, I think it's only right that that has to shift. And I think probably I wonder, I mean, one of the things I would love to find out is just really good examples from other practices, other people who are brilliant at doing it. I think my colleagues, in or our colleague Hala, actually, Emma Fisher, Dr. Emma Fisher, who is a researcher and a disabled artist, she and her colleagues are absolutely brilliant at this, at having, I guess, looking at other practices to find out, how things are done, to examples of best practice, that's what I'm getting at, and then modeling that, bringing that back to how we can open up that conversation. And you get me at a point where I am very much like here, kind of going, I'm aware there's stuff that needs to be done. I'm not quite sure how to do it, but I don't want that to be the moment that makes you feel helpless. I want it to be the moment that spurs you into action.
Thank you, Kathleen. Fiona.
Yeah, I was going to say that I am still in the middle of it, but I started a research project with community music leaders in Canada at the very beginning of the pandemic. And out of the 12 participants, only 2 of them were connected with a larger network for support. So, I mean, I was actually a little bit startled by that, but one of the things that came out of that research was that we're not very good at supporting the leaders in community music. We tend to focus on the participants' needs, right? And so these leaders struggle with support, and it had significant impact on their ability to be with their participants emotionally, musically, and in other ways. So I think that's something, and that I'm going to be publishing on that particular finding. So I think that's something that we need to maybe talk more about, is how do we support the leaders as well as the participants, which tends to be our focus.
Thank you so much, Fiona. And sorry, go on, Kathleen.
Oh, just to say, absolutely. I think I'd be so fascinated to read that, and I think we all would, and that I think we probably all recognise that, especially now, that the high propensity for burnout, the sometimes the isolation that can happen, especially for freelance community musicians, and that need to have a network of support. And that's a really important point, Fiona. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. I feel like that's another theme for another time, actually. In the UK context in England, we've got Arts Council England talking about freelance futures. We've got people like Nicola Naismith writing about artists practicing well from 2019. If you're interested in these things, just give me a nudge in the chat and I will send some links your way. We're nearly coming to a close, so these are the final few moments to ask a question or share something if you want to. Nicola, did you want to say something before we close? I'm not sure if I got that right.
I was just writing a note, but there's so many things that have been said, it's hard to pick up on. I'll try and just draw them in. I was just writing about the freelance community musicians. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I've come to realise through the pandemic is like freelancing is not an option for so many people, and it keeps people out. And freelancing during the pandemic was horrendous. I personally lost about 80% of my work because of my caring responsibilities. And it's taken me a long time to process the emotional labour of this. But I think it goes hand in hand with what Hannah was saying about like who's coming in, because like, I mean, I'm quite recent into the academy, but the people I meet tend to be people who are already in the field. The field isn't representative of the people we're working with. And the strange thing that I've noticed actually was when I came into research, I experienced a huge amount of hostility from organisations and fellow practitioners, sort of almost like I'd gone to the dark side, and this sort of wariness of, you know, I was becoming a researcher and almost like I was, you know, removing my values as a practitioner. So I basically stayed quiet last year and didn't speak to anyone because I was so scared. But interesting now, I'm having really fascinating conversations with people who aren't welcome in research, aren't welcome in the field of practice, or they feel their voices are silent, and they're putting their trust in me and they're engaging in conversation more so than ever. And I think it all comes down to power. To be honest, how is the field of practice being ran? How, you know, what has happened historically that has caused this sort of bridge of practice and research to happen? But it's I don't know where I'm going with it, but it's quite interesting because I still haven't been able to. I was sort of blown away from it, to be honest, some of the wariness and hostility, and even people I've worked for several years, they, you know, just won't really engage in conversation, or fairly dismissive, or big conversations are asked and I'm not welcomed along. So it's I think huge questions, and I think the freelance status of community musician is fundamentally flawed. I think it keeps so many people out. I think it keeps women out, and I think it really has to change. Susan Jones, I think her name is. I think she's a visual artist, but she's really, really well written on how freelancing is not a sustainable option, and I think that's the root cause of a huge amount of issues.
Thank you, Nicola. I was just trying to get that Susan Jones reference up there to put in the chat, so I'll try and find that if I can before the end of today. Well, Kathleen, I feel like you've sparked a lot of things in this conversation. I feel like there are more conversations to be had. If only we could maybe be together one time in in-person space. I think this might be time for us to be drawing to a close. I definitely want to just make a quick announcement before we end, but Kathleen, I do want to give you last couple of minutes to say anything you'd like to before we end the call. So can I pass over to you for a little bit of a wrap up in any way you want?
100%. Well, just firstly, thanks a million, Nicola, for that last point, because I think that is invaluable, and I think you draw our attention to a really important, again, another really important revealing here of another aspect of who feels welcome and who doesn't, and what's up with that. How do we navigate that? How do we figure it out? How do we do something about it? And maybe that's, I guess, what I am continuing to navigate, and what I hope might be useful for everybody to go away and have a think about is what can we do, and you know, what actions can we take, and also to do that within the context of being kind to ourselves and to each other, in the recognition that that kind of work is hard, it can be tiring, it's emotional labor, as we mentioned earlier. So even in a small way, like after this, because this is probably quite a big conversation for everybody, and maybe in those personal reflections might have been quite a lot, so that maybe after this, if there's a moment for everybody to have a bit of time for yourself, even if it's just 5 minutes with a cup of coffee or something that is restorative for you, I'd encourage you to do that. And to support each other, and just to say thank you as well for this lovely opportunity to be, part and parcel of this lovely community of thinkers and musicians and artists, and it's just really inspiring space. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Joe, for the lovely invitation, and for Rory doing all the technical things behind the scenes. I so appreciate it. So thanks a million.
Well, thank you a million. I wish I could say it in your dialect there, Kathleen. Thank you a million for today. I think this is time where we give you a massive round of applause for your awesome insights and discussion. Thank you so, so much. Yeah, amazing there. And just to say thank you to you all for coming along to this event today, or if you've been joining us over the last 2 years. We are drawing to a close just for a pause, to have a rethink about what might be useful going forward. As part of that, I'm in a new role at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, just temporarily there, but do keep in contact. I'll share my email as well. I'd love to stay in touch, and I will be around the ICCM. You do not lose me that easily. I just want to end this moment to say thank you to everybody that's supported the events along the way, and to say that the next ICCM event will be an in-person, the 7th annual Student Research Symposium, held at York St John University in the UK. The call for papers is open, so if you want to check that out, there's a link in the chat, and you are very welcome to submit to that. And do keep in touch with the centre. There's a mailing list. You can see other things coming up as things go along. And Nicola, Rory, we had Ryan and Catherine on the call, are still very much firmly there and about. So I'm sure they'll be in touch with updates and things that are going on. But just to say thank you all so much. I've absolutely loved meeting online in this way, and hope to do so in the future. So thank you all, and good luck, sorry about that buzz, with everything that you're going on to do. And as Kathleen said, take a moment, be kind to yourself. Yes, cup of tea. Bye everybody, thank you so much for joining, and hope to see you somewhere soon.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been great to see everyone.
Thanks a million, everybody. Cheerio.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.